Lily Morgan stood frozen on the platform of Willow Creek Station, her single trunk beside her, watching as the train that had carried her over 2,000 miles disappeared around the bend. The weight of what had just happened pressed down on her shoulders like a physical burden. Samuel Wright, the man who had exchanged letters with her for nearly a year, the man who had promised to marry her, had taken one look at her face and recoiled in horror. "This isn't what I agreed to," he had said, his voice cold as the mountain air. "Your letters never mentioned this." His eyes had flickered to the right side of her face, where a network of scars stretched from her temple to her jaw, a permanent reminder of the fire that had claimed her family home 5 years ago. The October wind whipped around her, catching her plain brown dress and tugging at her loosely pinned hair. At 36, Lily was painfully aware that she was now stranded in an unfamiliar frontier town with only $18 to her name and no prospects whatsoever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The wooden bench at the edge of the platform offered little comfort as Lily sank down, her legs suddenly unable to support her. Around her, Willow Creek, Colorado hummed with midday activity. Merchants calling their wares, horses clip-clopping along the dusty main street, the distant ring of metal from what must be a blacksmith's workshop. None of it registered properly as she stared blankly at the small railroad station's weathered sign. What would she do now? Return to Philadelphia, where her teaching position had been eliminated after parents complained about her scars frightening the children, where the landlady of her boarding house had recently doubled the rent, making it impossible to stay, where not a single living soul would notice or care if she disappeared. Samuel's letters had seemed like a miracle when she'd first read his advertisement in the newspaper, a successful rancher in Colorado seeking a woman of good character and education to be his wife. Their correspondence had given her hope. His words speaking of respect, partnership, and the promise of a new beginning. Not once had he mentioned beauty as a requirement, which had given Lily the courage to respond and eventually accept his proposal. She had been honest about her age, her background as a teacher, and her desire for a fresh start after losing her position. What she hadn't explicitly described were the scars that twisted across her face, the result of trying to save her young niece from the flames that had devoured her sister's home. The child had survived, Lily's smooth skin had not. "You waiting for someone, Mom?" Lily looked up to see a rail worker eyeing her with mild concern. His weathered face spoke of years spent under the Colorado sun. "I was," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "But they're not coming." Something like understanding crossed the man's face, but he merely nodded. "Station closes at 6. Eastbound trains won't be back until Wednesday. Wednesday, 3 days from now. 3 days to somehow find enough money for a ticket back to a city that didn't want her." The weight of her situation pressed in, threatening to crush her. "Thank you," she managed, and the worker moved on, leaving her alone with her thoughts once more. The dinner bell from what appeared to be a small hotel across the street rang out, reminding Lily that she hadn't eaten since early morning. Food seemed unimportant in the face of her predicament, but practical sense won out. She would need her strength to figure out what to do next. Standing up, she straightened her spine and adjusted her hair, a lifetime of proper upbringing asserting itself even now. With as much dignity as she could muster, she picked up her trunk and made her way down the platform steps. The main street of Willow Creek was wider than she had expected, lined with false-fronted buildings, a general store, a bank, what appeared to be a doctor's office, and several other establishments she couldn't immediately identify. At the far end stood a modest church, its white steeple reaching toward the vast blue Colorado sky. The small hotel, Willow Creek Inn, according to. The swinging sign seemed her best option for a meal and information about potential work. $18 wouldn't last long, but Lily knew she had to start somewhere. As she approached the hotel porch, the door swung open forcefully, nearly hitting her. Samuel Wright stormed out, his face flushed with irritation. He halted abruptly. Upon seeing Lily, his expression hardening. "Miss Morgan," he said stiffly, "I thought you'd already arranged return transportation." Lily met his gaze squarely, refusing to show weakness despite the pain his rejection had caused. "The next eastbound train isn't until Wednesday, Mr. Wright. I need accommodations until then." Samuel shifted uncomfortably, glancing around as if worried someone might see them together. "Look, I'm sorry about how things turned out, but you should have been forthright about your condition." The word stung worse than any physical blow. "My condition doesn't affect my ability to keep a house, or to be a good partner, or to and teach children," Lily replied, her voice low but firm. "I was forthright about everything that should matter." Samuel's jaw tightened. "A man has a right to know what he's getting. These scars—" He gestured vaguely toward her face, never quite looking directly at it. "You should have mentioned them. And you should have mentioned that you were looking for ornamental value rather than character," Lily countered, surprising herself with her boldness. Philadelphia society had taught her to be accommodating, to hide her disappointments. But something about being here, with nothing left to lose, loosened her tongue. Samuel's face darkened. "I have a position to maintain in this community. People have expectations." "Yes, I imagine they do," Lily said quietly. "Excuse me, Mr. Wright, I need to secure lodging." She moved to step past him, but he caught her arm, his grip firm but not painful. "The train ticket," he said, lowering his voice. "I'll pay for your return to Philadelphia. Wait here." He disappeared back into the hotel before she could respond, leaving Lily standing there, her cheeks burning with humiliation. Even his attempt at generosity felt like another rejection, a payment to ensure she removed herself from his life as quickly as possible. Through the window, she could see him speaking to the hotel owner, gesturing in her direction. The owner, portly man with a bushy mustache, glanced at her with undisguised curiosity, then nodded to whatever Samuel was saying. A few moments later, Samuel emerged with a small envelope, which he thrust toward her awkwardly. "This should cover your ticket and meals until Wednesday. The hotel has no vacancies due to the Harvest Festival, but Tom at the livery stable has rooms he sometimes rents above his workshop. It's not much, but it's clean." Lily stared at the envelope, pride warring with practicality. She had $18 to her name. A train ticket east would cost nearly all of it, leaving nothing for food or shelter in the meantime. "Thank you," she said finally, accepting the envelope without meeting his eyes. Samuel nodded curtly. "I trust this resolves our arrangement, Miss Morgan. Good day." As he walked away toward the far end of town, his back straight and steps hurried, Lily let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. In just a few hours, her hopes for a new beginning had been shattered, leaving her stranded and humiliated in a town where her only contact clearly wished she would disappear. The sun was beginning to dip toward the mountains to the west, casting long shadows across the street. With a sigh, Lily picked up her trunk again and made her way toward the livery stable Samuel had mentioned. She would secure lodging first, then find something to eat. One step at a time, as her grandmother used to say. The livery stable sat at the edge of town, a large weathered structure with wide doors currently standing open. The sounds of horses nickering and the smell of hay and leather filled the air. Next to it stood a smaller building with smoke rising from its chimney, the rhythmic clang of metal on metal, confirming it was indeed the blacksmith's forge she had heard earlier. Setting down her trunk with relief, the thing weighed a ton. Lily approached the stable entrance. A thin, wiry man in his 60s was brushing down a handsome bay gelding, his movements methodical and practiced. "Excuse me," Lily called, keeping her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "Are you Tom? I was told you might have a room available." The man glanced up, his eyes widening slightly as they took in her scarred face. To his credit, his gaze didn't linger there, shifting quickly to meet her eyes. "That'd be my brother Thomas," he replied, setting down the brush. "I'm Walter Davis. Tom's up at the festival committee meeting. Won't be back till supper time." His voice was gruff but not unkind. "I see," Lily said, trying to mask her disappointment. "Another delay, another obstacle. Is there somewhere I might wait for him?" Walter studied her for a moment, his weathered face unreadable. "You the teacher Samuel Wright sent for?" The direct question caught Lily off guard. "I was," she admitted. "But it seems there was a misunderstanding." Understanding dawned in Walter's eyes, followed by something that might have been sympathy. Wright's a fool, then," he said simply, turning back to the horse. "You can wait in the office if you like. First door on the left inside. There's a stove and some coffee." Gratitude washed over Lily. "Thank you, Mr. Davis." She had just picked up her trunk again when a deep voice spoke from behind her. "Let me help you with that." Lily turned to find herself facing a mountain of a man. He stood well over 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered and solid, wearing a leather apron darkened with soot and sweat. His rolled-up sleeves revealed powerful forearms, marked with small burns and nicks. The hazards of working metal, she supposed, but it was his face that caught and held her attention. The left side was handsome enough. Strong jaw, straight nose, clear grey eyes under dark brows. But the right side bore extensive burn scars, more severe than her own, pulling his mouth slightly downward and leaving a patchwork of healed tissue from temple to collar. The man met her gaze steadily, neither hiding his scars nor calling attention. To them, when his eyes briefly took in her own scarred face, there was no shock, no revulsion, just a flicker of recognition. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "I've got it," Lily said automatically, the ingrained independence of years making her refuse before she could think better of it. The corner of his mouth, the unaffected side, lifted slightly. "No doubt you do, Mom. But that doesn't mean you should have to." Without waiting for further argument, he bent and lifted her trunk as if it weighed nothing more than a loaf of bread. "Office is this way. Walter giving you the usual warm welcome?" This last was directed at the older man, who snorted without looking up from his work. "More welcome than you give most folks, Ethan Blackwood. Now stop cluttering up my stable with your oversized self." The exchange held the comfortable familiarity of long association, and despite everything, Lily found herself smiling faintly. The tall man, Ethan, caught the expression and returned it, his scarred face transforming with unexpected warmth. "Don't mind Walter," he said as he led the way toward the office. "He saves his charm for the horses. They're better company, according to him." "Wiser conversation, too," Walter called after them, prompting a deep chuckle from Ethan. The office was small but tidy, with a pot-bellied stove in one corner and a scarred desk covered with ledgers. Ethan set her trunk down carefully beside a wooden chair. "You're waiting for Tom about the room?" he asked, straightening up. Lily nodded. "Yes. Mr. Wright suggested it might be available." Something flickered in Ethan's grey eyes at the mention of Samuel Wright, but his expression remained neutral. "It is. Tom's got 2 rooms above the workshop he rents out sometimes. Simple, but they've got proper beds and stoves. He won't be back for a while, though." "So I understand," Lily replied, suddenly acutely aware of how dishevelled she must look after the journey and the emotional devastation of the day's events. Ethan seemed to read her thoughts. "You look like you could use a meal. Maggie Jenkins runs the cafe next to the general store. Best food in town, and she won't charge you an arm and a leg like that highway robber over at the hotel." The kindness in his voice, offered without pity or ulterior motive, nearly undid Lily's carefully maintained composure. She blinked rapidly, determined not to cry in front of this stranger. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood. I appreciate the recommendation." "Ethan," he corrected, then hesitated. "I'd be happy to walk you over there. Town can be confusing to newcomers." Willow Creek had exactly one main street and couldn't have been home to more than 500 souls, but Lily understood the offer for what it was. Simple kindness to a woman clearly having a difficult day. "That's very kind, but I wouldn't want to take you from your work," she said, gesturing to his blacksmith's apron. "Fires banked for the afternoon," he replied with a shrug of his massive shoulders. "I was just finishing up some nails, nothing that can't wait." Before Lily could respond, Walter appeared in the doorway, looking annoyed. "Blackwood, if you're done chatting up the lady, Harrington's here about his wagon wheel, says it's urgent." Ethan sighed, shooting Lily an apologetic look. "Duty calls. Cafe's the blue building with the white trim just past the general store. Can't miss it." He paused, then added, "If you'd like, I can come find you there in about an hour. Help you get settled with Tom when he returns." The offer was unexpected, and Lily found herself nodding before she could consider why. "Thank you. That would be helpful." With a nod that somehow managed to be both casual and courtly, Ethan turned to go, his large frame filling the doorway. Momentarily, before he disappeared back toward his forge, Walter gave Lily a speculative look. "Coffee's fresh," he said, nodding toward a pot on the small stove. "Help yourself, and don't mind Ethan. He's rough around the edges, but he's a decent folks." With that cryptic comment, he too disappeared, leaving Lily alone in the quiet office. She sank into the wooden chair, suddenly exhausted. The day had been a pendulum, swinging between despair and small kindnesses from unexpected sources. She didn't know what awaited her at Maggie Jenkins' cafe, or what would happen when Tom returned, or how she would rebuild her life after this latest setback. But for the first time since stepping off the train to face Samuel Wright's rejection, Lily felt something stir within her that might, with careful tending, grow into hope. And if that hope was partially tied to the memory of Gray, eyes that had looked at her scars and seen a person rather than a flaw, well, that was a realization for another time. The blue-painted cafe was exactly where Ethan had said it would be, its white trim freshly painted and window boxes still sporting late-blooming flowers despite the October chill. A small bell tinkled as Lily pushed open the door, immediately enveloping her in warmth and the mouth-watering aroma of fresh bread and stew. Unlike the railroad station and livery stable, Maggie's cafe was busy. Nearly every table was occupied by townsfolk lingering over late afternoon meals or coffee. The hum of conversation dipped momentarily as heads turned toward the newcomer, curious eyes inevitably finding and fixing on the right side of Lily's face. A lesser woman might have turned and fled. But Lily had endured 5 years of such stares in Philadelphia, from adults who should have known better, from children who didn't know yet. She lifted her chin slightly and stepped fully into the cafe, letting the door swing shut behind her. "Well, don't just stand there catching flies with your mouths open," called a robust voice from behind the counter. "Haven't you all got better things to do than gawk?" The speaker was a woman in her 40s, with auburn hair streaked with silver, pulled back in a no-nonsense bun. She wore a flour-dusted apron over a practical blue dress and was regarding her customers with the kind of stern affection that reminded Lily of her former school principal. Conversations resumed. Gazes reluctantly returned to their companions, and the auburn-haired woman approached, wiping her hands on her apron. "Don't mind them," she said in a lower voice when she reached Lily. "Willow Creek's a fine place, but we don't get many new faces. I'm Maggie Jenkins." "Lily Morgan," she replied, extending her hand, which Maggie clasped firmly. "Well, Miss Morgan, you look like you could use a hot meal and a moment's peace." There's a table in the back corner that should suit. Gratitude washed over Lily. Thank you. Mr. Blackwood recommended your establishment highly. Maggie's eyebrows rose slightly. Ethan Blackwood. Now there's a surprise. Man hardly speaks three words together most days. She led Lily to the promised corner table, partially screened from the rest of the cafe by a wooden partition. It offered a perfect balance of privacy and the comfort of not being completely isolated. "What brings you to our little corner of Colorado?" Maggie asked as she poured water from a pitcher into a glass. The question was casual, but Lily sensed genuine interest rather than mere prying. "I was to marry Samuel Wright," Lily answered, truthfully seeing no point in fabrication in a town this size. News of her arrival and rejection had likely already spread. There was a misunderstanding. Understanding dawned in Maggie's eyes, followed by something that looked remarkably like disgust. "Samuel Wright," she said, the name flattening in her mouth. "I see." The lack of surprise in her tone spoke volumes. Lily wondered if she wasn't the first mail-order bride to be found wanting by the rancher. "The special today is beef stew with dumplings," Maggie continued after a moment, smoothly changing the subject. "Comes with fresh bread and apple cobbler. For dessert, 50 cents for the full meal." "That sounds wonderful," Lily said, calculating quickly. Even with Samuel's money for the train ticket, she needed to be careful with her remaining funds. As if reading her thoughts, Maggie added casually, "We also have an arrangement for folks who are just passing through or between situations. 3 meals a day in exchange for 2 hours of help in the kitchen, dishes mainly, some vegetable chopping." The offer was presented so matter-of-factly that it didn't feel like charity, and Lily found herself nodding gratefully. "No, that's very kind. I'd be happy to help until my train leaves on Wednesday." Maggie's smile warmed her entire face. "Excellent. You can start tomorrow morning if that suits. For now, you just sit tight and I'll bring you that stew." She bustled away, leaving Lily to observe the cafe's patrons from her sheltered corner. The townspeople seemed a typical mix for a frontier community, farmers and ranchers coming in from the surrounding countryside, shopkeepers taking late afternoon breaks. A few women she guessed might be wives or local businesswomen. A table of men near the front wore the dust of the mines that Lily had glimpsed in the hills surrounding Willow Creek. None seemed particularly hostile, though several shot curious glances her way when they thought she wasn't looking. Lily was accustomed to such scrutiny. It was the blatant revulsion in Samuel Wright's eyes that had cut so deeply, perhaps because she had allowed herself to hope for something different after their months of correspondence. Maggie returned with a steaming bowl of stew and a plate bearing a thick slice of brown bread, still warm from the oven. "Eat up," she encouraged. "You look like you've had a long day." The first spoonful nearly brought tears to Lily's eyes. Rich broth, tender beef, and vegetables cooked to perfection. She hadn't realized how hungry she was until food was before her. "This is delicious," she said sincerely, breaking off a piece of the crusty bread. Maggie beamed with professional pride. "Secrets in the stock. Simmer it for hours with marrow bones." She glanced toward the front of the cafe. "Looks like you've got company." Lily followed her gaze to see Ethan Blackwood ducking his head slightly to clear the doorframe as he entered. He'd removed his leather apron and washed up, though his clothes still bore the marks of his trade. Despite his imposing size, he moved with surprising grace, navigating between the tables with care not to bump the patrons. Several people greeted him with familiar nods or brief words, which he acknowledged with equal brevity. Not unfriendly, Lily noted, but reserved, a man comfortable with his place in the community, but not given to unnecessary socializing. "Just in time," Maggie called to him. "I've got a fresh batch of stew." Ethan nodded, his eyes finding Lily in her corner. "Evening, Miss Morgan," he said as he approached. "I see you found Maggie's without trouble. As you said, it wasn't difficult." "Until locate," Lily replied, gesturing to the chair across from her. "Would you care to join me? I'd welcome the company." A flicker of surprise crossed his face before he nodded, folding his large frame into the wooden chair with care. Up close, the contrast between the unmarred left side of his face and the scarred right was even more pronounced, yet somehow less jarring now that she'd had time to adjust to it. "I spoke with Tom," Ethan said as Maggie appeared with another bowl of stew and mug of coffee, setting them before him without comment. "He's happy to rent you a room. $7 a week, includes linens and firewood for the stove." Lily's heart sank. $7 was more than a third of her remaining money, even with Samuel's contribution for the train ticket. She'd have nothing left for emergencies or to establish herself back in Philadelphia. Something of her calculations must have shown on her face, because Ethan added, "He's willing to take $3 for just the 3 nights until Wednesday." Udo said there's no sense charging a full week for a partial stay. Relief washed over her. "That's very reasonable of him." Ethan shrugged his broad shoulders, focusing on his stew. "Tom's fair-minded. He'll be back at the livery around 7 to show you the room." They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the noise of the cafe providing a buffer against any awkwardness. Lily found herself studying Ethan when he wasn't looking, the careful precision of his movements, the strength evident in his blacksmith's hands, the way his grey eyes took in everything without seeming to stare. "Were you born in Willow Creek, Mr. Blackwood?" she asked finally, curious about this man who seemed so at ease with himself despite scars that must have drawn as many stares as her own. "Ethan," he corrected again, "and no. Came here 8 years ago from Tennessee." "What brought you so far west?" A shadow passed over his face. "Change of scenery," he said after a pause, in a tone that discouraged further questions on that line. Lily nodded, respecting his privacy. "It's a beautiful country," she offered instead. "It is," he agreed, his expression softening. "Different. From Philadelphia, I imagine. Very. Everything here feels bigger. The sky, the mountains, even the silence has weight to it." That earned her a genuine smile that transformed his entire face, softening the taut skin of his scars and lighting his grey eyes. "Most Easterners complain about the emptiness, find it unnerving." "I find it peaceful," Lily admitted. "Though I've only been here a matter of hours, so perhaps the appeal will wear off." Ethan studied her thoughtfully, his spoon paused halfway to his mouth. "Samuel Wright's a fool," he said abruptly, echoing Walter's earlier assessment. Heat rushed to Lily's face. "You're very kind, but not kindness, just the truth." He set down his spoon. "Wright wanted a trophy, not a partner. Some men can't see past their own shallow expectations to recognize what's valuable." The simple statement, delivered without a hint of pity or false flattery, touched something deep within Lily. For 5 years, people had either cringed from her scars or offered saccharine assurances that they didn't even notice them, or that she was still beautiful underneath. Ethan had done neither. He'd acknowledged reality and dismissed Samuel's judgment as the flaw it was. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for seeing me." Something passed between them in that moment, a recognition perhaps of kindred spirits marked by both visible and invisible scars. The cafe door banged open, breaking the spell as a young boy of about 12 burst in, his face flushed with excitement. "Mr. Blackwood!" he called, scanning the room until he spotted Ethan. "Pa sent me to—" "Bet you. The Carson boys brought in a wagon with a broken axle, and their horses are still hitched and getting mighty restless." Ethan's demeanor shifted instantly to focused alertness. "Tell your pa I'm coming, Jimmy," he said, rising from his chair. He turned to Lily. "My apologies, Miss Morgan. Duty calls." "Of course," she replied. "Thank you for your company." He hesitated, then reached into his pocket and withdrew a small brass key. "Room above the workshop. he explained, placing it on the table. Top of the stairs, door on the right. Clean linens in the chest at the foot of the bed. I'll tell Tom you're settled. Before Lily could protest this presumption, he added, no sense sitting around waiting when you're tired from traveling. Tom can find you tomorrow for the payment. With that practical assessment, he nodded a farewell and strode out, following the boy. Maggie appeared almost immediately, clearing Ethan's empty bowl with a speculative glance between it and Lily. Well, she said meaningfully. Well, what? Lily asked, finishing the last of her delicious stew. I've known Ethan Blackwood for 6 years, and that's the most I've ever heard him speak to anyone who wasn't discussing horseshoes or wagon repairs. She set down a small plate with a generous serving of apple cobbler. On the house, she added with a wink. That's not necessary, Lily began, but Maggie waved away her protest. Consider it a welcome to Willow Creek. Besides, you'll work it. Off tomorrow with those dishes. As Lily savored the sweet dessert, she found her thoughts drifting to Ethan's scarred face and direct gaze. She'd come to Colorado seeking security and partnership with a man who had proven shallow and unkind. Now, stranded and uncertain, she'd found unexpected kindness from strangers who seemed to value substance over appearance. The irony wasn't lost on her. By the time she finished her cobbler, the cafe had largely emptied as people headed home for evening chores and family time. Lily paid for her meal, thanked Maggie again for the employment opportunity, and stepped out into the rapidly cooling evening air. The livery stable was easy to find in the gathering dusk, lights glowing from its windows. Her trunk still sat in Walter's office, and she was grateful to find it untouched. The older man was nowhere to be seen, but a note had been left propped against her luggage. Miss Morgan, Ethan said you'll be taking the room, up the outside stairs next to the forge. Walter. The stairs in question were sturdy wooden steps leading to a small landing outside the workshop. Lily hefted her trunk with a sigh, beginning the awkward process of maneuvering it up the steep incline. She'd managed 3 steps when a voice called from below. Miss Morgan, please allow me. A man in his 50s, with a sun-weathered face and thinning brown hair, stood at the bottom of the stairs. Unlike Walter's leanness or Ethan's powerful build, this man had the comfortable roundness of middle age and prosperity. I'm Thomas Davis, he said, ascending the steps and easily lifting her trunk. Everyone calls me Tom. I understand you'll be staying with us for a few nights. Yes, Lily confirmed, following him up the stairs. Until Wednesday's train. Ethan said it would be $3 for the 3 nights. That's right, Tom agreed easily, setting down the trunk to unlock the door, apparently unaware that Ethan had already provided her with a key. Simple accommodations, but clean. The room was indeed simple. A single bed with an iron frame, a small wooden table with an oil lamp, a chest for storage, and a pot-bellied stove in the corner. A braided rug covered part of the wooden floor, and curtains framed the single window. What the space lacked in luxury, it made up for in cleanliness and sturdy construction. Washrooms at the end of the hall, Tom explained, setting her trunk at the foot of the bed. Cold water only, I'm afraid. Chamber pot under the bed for night time. It's perfect, Lily said sincerely. Thank you. Tom shifted, seeming slightly uncomfortable. Ethan mentioned your situation with Samuel Wright. Terrible business. Wright's not well regarded by many here, though he has money and influence with some. Lily tensed, uncertain where this conversation was heading. What I mean to say, Tom continued, is that you shouldn't judge all of Willow Creek by one man's poor behavior. We're generally decent folks here. The sincere concern in his voice was touching. I've already experienced much kindness since arriving, Lily assured him. Your brother, Mr. Blackwood, Mrs. Jenkins. Tom's expression brightened. Good, good. Well, I'll leave you to get settled. Payment can wait until morning. After he left, Lily sank onto the edge of the bed, suddenly overwhelmed by the events of the day. In the space of 12 hours, she had arrived full of hope, been cruelly rejected, and somehow found herself employed and housed through the unexpected kindness of strangers. She moved to the window, drawing back the curtain to gaze at the view. From this vantage point, she could see the main street of Willow Creek falling into evening shadow, lamps being lit in windows, and beyond that, the majestic silhouettes of mountains against the darkening sky. Movement below caught her attention. Ethan had returned to his forge and was working by lamplight, his powerful arms swinging a hammer in rhythmic strokes against glowing metal. Sparks flew with each impact, momentarily illuminating his concentrated expression. There was something mesmerizing about watching him work. The confidence of his movements, the focused intensity, the transformation of unyielding metal beneath his skilled hands. Here was a man who had clearly made peace with his scars, who had forged a life of respect and purpose despite them, or perhaps because of them. For the first time since the fire that had marked her, Lily wondered if there might be strength to be found in surviving, in being visibly broken, and yet continuing forward. If her scars might be not just wounds to hide or overcome, but testament to a courage she had never fully acknowledged in herself. The thought was both terrifying and strangely liberating. As darkness settled fully over Willow Creek, Lily lit the oil lamp and began unpacking the few possessions she had brought for what was supposed to be the beginning of her new life. Among them was a small, leather-bound journal, a gift from her sister years ago. She had not written in it since before the fire. Tonight, she opened it to a blank page and began to record the events of the day, not as a catalogue of disappointments, but as the unexpected beginning of something she could not yet name. Morning came to Willow Creek with the sound of birdsong and distant livestock. Lily woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was, until the unfamiliar ceiling above her came into focus. The events of the previous day flooded back, Samuel's rejection, the unexpected kindness of strangers, and the small room above a blacksmith's forge that would be her temporary home. She had slept surprisingly well, exhaustion overcoming the discomfort of being in a strange place. Golden sunlight streamed through the simple curtains, painting patterns on the wooden floor. From below came the rhythmic sound of Ethan's hammer already at work, the heartbeat of the day beginning. Splashing her face with cold water from the basin, Lily assessed her options. She had promised to help Maggie at the cafe, which would secure her meals until Wednesday's train. 3 nights of lodging were arranged. Her immediate needs were met, giving her precious time to consider what awaited back in Philadelphia, or if returning was truly her best option. After dressing in her second-best dress, a modest navy blue with white collar, Lily pinned her brown hair into a simple but neat arrangement. Working in a cafe meant she needed to be presentable, even if her scars would always prevent her from being conventionally attractive. The air outside carried the crispness of October in the mountains, tinged with wood smoke and the metallic scent from Ethan's forge. Pausing on the landing, Lily watched him work for a moment. He wore only a shirt with the sleeves rolled up, suspenders holding up his work pants, his powerful arms glistening with a sheen of sweat despite the morning chill. The scarred side of his face was turned toward her, revealing the extent of the damage from temple to jaw, disappearing beneath his collar. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up, hammer paused mid-swing. "Morning, Miss Morgan," he called, straightening. "Sleep well." "Surprisingly so, thank you," she replied, descending the stairs. "And it's Lily, please. If I'm to call you Ethan, it seems only fair." A brief smile crossed his face. "Lily, then." The sound of her name in his deep voice caused an unexpected flutter in her chest. "Off to Maggie's?" "Yes. I'll be helping in the kitchen in exchange for meals. Do you know if there might be other work available in town?" "Something temporary, but paid." Ethan set down his hammer, considering. "Harvest festival's coming up this weekend. Mrs. Henderson at the Mercantile usually needs extra hands to manage the rush. Worth asking." "I will. Thank you." Lily hesitated, then added, "I appreciate all your help yesterday. Not everyone would have been so kind to a stranger." His grey eyes met hers directly. Kindness costs nothing, and we all need it sometimes. There was a story there, in his scars, in his deliberate choice of words, in the understanding that passed between them. But Lily knew better than to press. Some stories needed time and trust before they could be shared. "I should go," she said finally. "Maggie will be expecting me." Ethan nodded, turning back to his work. "Mrs. Henderson's place is just past the bank, green awning. Can't miss it." The street was busy with morning activity as Lily made her way toward the cafe. Unlike yesterday's curious stares, today she received a few nods of acknowledgement from people who had seen her at Maggie's. It was strange how quickly one could go from outsider to semi-familiar face in a small town. Maggie's cafe was bustling with breakfast customers when Lily arrived, the aroma of coffee and frying bacon greeting her as she slipped in through the back door as instructed. "There you are!" Maggie exclaimed, looking up from a large skillet where she was flipping hotcakes. "Perfect timing. Grab that apron on the hook and start with those dishes, would you? Once the breakfast rush dies down, I'll show you where everything goes." For the next 2 hours, Lily immersed herself in work, washing dishes, chopping vegetables for the midday stew, kneading dough for fresh bread. It was physical labor, different from teaching, but satisfying in its immediate results. Maggie was an efficient taskmaster, but generous with both instruction and praise when deserved. "You've got good hands," she commented as Lily expertly shaped dough into loaves. "Quick learner, too." "I've always enjoyed cooking," Lily admitted, "though I had little opportunity for it at the boarding house in Philadelphia." "What brought you to teaching?" Maggie asked, expertly cracking eggs into a bowl without pausing in her conversation. "My father was a professor of literature," Lily explained, focusing on her task. "Books were sacred in our home. After he died, teaching seemed the natural path. I taught at a small private girls' school for 12 years. Until the fire." Maggie's question was direct but not unkind. Lily's hands stilled momentarily. "Yes. Afterward, parents complained. The headmistress was sympathetic but practical. Enrollment matters, and my appearance frightened some of the younger children." Maggie made a sound of disgust. "People and their foolish prejudices. As if scars make you any less capable of teaching Jane Austen." The simple understanding in her voice loosened something tight in Lily's chest. "The school compensated me fairly," she said, resuming her bread-making. "But positions for female teachers are limited and without references, so you answered Samuel Wright's advertisement," Maggie concluded. "He wrote beautiful letters," Lily said softly, "about building a life together, about respect and partnership. He never once mentioned beauty as a requirement." "Men like Samuel Wright care deeply about appearances," Maggie replied, her tone bitter with old knowledge. "Not their own character, mind you, but how others perceive them. A scarred wife would raise questions, invite pity. His pride couldn't bear it." Lily glanced up, catching something personal in Maggie's expression. "You know him well?" Maggie's mouth twisted. "Well enough. He courted my younger sister 8 years ago. Broke her heart when a wealthy widow from Denver showed interest. The widow wisely reconsidered, but by then Emma had seen his true nature." "I'm sorry," Lily said sincerely. "Don't be. Emma's happily married to a cattle rancher now, with 3 beautiful children. She counts her escape from Samuel Wright as divine intervention." Maggie wiped her hands on her apron. "Those loaves are ready for the oven. Then take a break. You've earned it. Coffee's fresh." As Lily slid the bread into the large brick oven, the bell over the front door jingled. Peering around the doorframe that separated the kitchen from the dining room, she saw Samuel Wright himself enter, accompanied by another man in an expensive suit. They took a table near the window, Samuel's back to the kitchen. "Speak of the devil," Maggie muttered, appearing at Lily's side. That's Judge Parker with him. They're thick as thieves these days with the railroad planning to expand through the valley. Lily retreated further into the kitchen, heart pounding. She had no desire to face Samuel again so soon, especially while covered in flour and working as a dishwasher, positions that would only confirm his assessment of her unsuitability. Maggie squeezed her arm gently. "Stay back here. I'll handle them." Through the doorway, Lily could hear snippets of conversation as Maggie took their order with professional politeness that nonetheless carried an unmistakable chill. "I'm expecting the survey results by the end of week," the judge was saying. "The town council will need to approve the route," Samuel replied. "But with the right incentives, I don't foresee problems." Henderson's still holding out. "He'll come around or get left behind. Progress waits for no man." Their voices lowered, and Lily could make out no more of the conversation. She busied herself with cleaning the work surfaces, trying to ignore Samuel's presence just yards away. The back door opened, admitting Ethan Blackwood. He carried a small metal box, the hinges of which appeared freshly repaired. "Maggie's lockbox," he explained, seeing Lily's questioning look. "Hinge broke yesterday." His gaze shifted to the dining room beyond, narrowing slightly as he recognized Samuel. "Coffee, Ethan?" Lily offered, gesturing to the pot. "Thanks." He accepted the cup she poured, his large fingers careful around the delicate china. "Are you settling in all right?" "Yes. Everyone has been very kind." Ethan took a sip of coffee, his gray eyes studying her over the rim. "You don't have to leave. Wednesday," he said abruptly. Lily blinked in surprise. "I beg your pardon?" "The Eastern train. You don't have to be on it." He set down his cup. "Willow Creek needs a teacher." "I what?" Lily struggled to follow this sudden shift in conversation. "Town's been trying to hire a proper teacher for months. Children are being taught by Mrs. Simmons, the preacher's wife, but she's expecting her 5th child and can't continue past Christmas. But I have no position here," Lily said, bewildered by this unexpected development. "You could," Ethan replied simply. "Town council meets tonight. I serve as secretary since I can write a fare. And I could mention your qualifications." The possibility hadn't occurred to Lily that her skills might still be valued here, that her scars might not be the insurmountable barrier they had proven in Philadelphia. Hope flickered within her, quickly tempered by practical concerns. Even if they were interested, there would be arrangements to make, housing to secure. "I have nowhere." "Tom's room is available monthly," Ethan interrupted. $20, including basic furniture. Teaching position pays $40 a month plus housing allowance of $10. The figures swam in Lily's head. $50 monthly was less than she'd earned at the private school, but in a small town like Willow Creek, with lower costs and no Philadelphia society to keep up appearances for, it might be enough for a modest but comfortable life. "Why would you do this?" she asked softly. "You barely know me." Ethan's expression was unreadable. "Willow Creek needs a teacher. You need a fresh start." Seems simple enough. Before Lily could respond, Maggie bustled back into the kitchen, her face tight with suppressed anger. "That man," she muttered, grabbing plates with unnecessary force. "Sitting there talking about progress when what he means is lining his own pockets at everyone else's expense." She glanced between Lily and Ethan, sensing she had interrupted something. "Did I miss something important?" "Just telling Miss Moore, Lily, about the teaching position," Ethan said. Maggie's eyes widened. "Oh, what a perfect idea. You'd be wonderful, Lily. Those children need someone with proper training, not just good intentions like poor Martha Simmons." "It's very premature," Lily cautioned, overwhelmed by how quickly events were moving. "The council would need to interview me, consider my references." "Bring your credentials to the meeting tonight," Ethan suggested. 7 o'clock at the town hall. Can't hurt to try." The sound of a throat clearing interrupted them. "Samuel Wright." stood in the doorway between kitchen and dining room, his expression darkening as he took in the scene. Lily, flour-dusted in an apron, Ethan Blackwood comfortably ensconced at the kitchen table, Maggie hovering protectively nearby. "Excuse me," he said stiffly, "I need to settle my bill." Maggie moved to block his view of Lily. "I'll handle that at your table, Mr. Wright." Samuel ignored her, his gaze fixed on Lily. "I see you've found employment suited to your capabilities." The deliberate cruelty of the remark hung in the air. Lily felt heat rise to her cheeks, not from embarrassment this time, but anger. This man had written her beautiful words about partnership and respect, only to reveal himself as shallow and unkind when faced with physical imperfection. "I've found kindness and community," she replied evenly, "which speaks more to the character of Willow Creek than to mine." Samuel's jaw tightened. "I compensated you fairly for your inconvenience. I would think gratitude is more appropriate than this display." Ethan rose slowly to his full height, towering over Samuel by a good 6 inches. He said nothing, but his presence alone seemed to fill the small kitchen with potential energy, like a thundercloud before lightning strikes. "Your bill, Mr. Wright," Maggie said firmly, slapping a piece of paper onto his palm. "That will be 75 cents. I added extra for the inconvenience of you entering my kitchen without permission." Samuel's face flushed with anger, but something in Ethan's steady gaze made him reconsider whatever retort had sprung to mind. He placed coins on the counter with exaggerated precision. "Judge Parker and I were just discussing the railroad's plans," he said, his voice regaining its smooth control. "Significant changes coming to Willow Creek. Property values will rise dramatically for those on the right side of progress." His gaze flicked to Ethan. "And fall for those who cling to outdated ways." With that parting shot, he turned and left, the bell jangling discordantly as the door closed behind him. "Insufferable man," Maggie muttered. "Always lording his connections over everyone, as if owning the largest ranch makes him Emperor of Colorado." Lily's mind was racing. What did he mean about the railroad? Ethan's expression had darkened. "Northern Pacific is planning a spur line through the valley. Would connect Willow Creek to Denver, open new markets. Good for the town overall, but the proposed route runs through existing properties." "Including yours," Lily guessed, seeing the tension in his jaw. "My forge sits on what they're calling optimal ground for a depot," he confirmed. "Henderson's mercantile, too, and a few other businesses. We'd be forced to relocate or sell." "But that's your livelihood," Lily said, distressed at the thought. "Your home." "Been through worse," Ethan replied, though the tightness around his eyes belied his casual tone. "Nothing's decided yet. Town council has to approve any final plans." "Which is why Samuel's courting Judge Parker's influence," Maggie added. "The judge owns shares in the railroad company. Conflict of interest, if you ask me, but nobody does." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the midday rush, farmers and shopkeepers coming in for quick meals before returning to work. Lily was soon busy serving plates and refilling coffee cups, thoughts of teaching positions and railroad disputes temporarily pushed aside by immediate demands. It wasn't until late afternoon, as the cafe quieted once more, that she had a chance to reflect on Ethan's surprising offer. The teaching position presented an unexpected opportunity, a chance to use her skills to rebuild a life in this mountain town where her scars seemed to matter less than her capabilities. Yet she barely knew Willow Creek or its people. Would the parents accept a teacher whose face might frighten their children? Would the town council see beyond her scars to her qualifications? And what of Samuel Wright's obvious influence in local affairs? "You're thinking so hard I can practically hear it," Maggie commented, setting a cup of tea before Lily at the kitchen table. "About the teaching position," Lily nodded. "It's tempting, but perhaps unwise. I know nothing about Willow Creek beyond what I've seen in a day." "What you've seen is pretty representative," Maggie replied, sitting across from her. "Some good people, some difficult ones, most just trying to get by. The children need a proper education. Most parents care more about that than about a teacher's appearance." "Samuel Wright seems to have considerable influence," Lily observed. "If he objects to my appointment," Maggie snorted. "Samuel likes to think he runs this town, but plenty of folks see through him. Judge Parker's in his pocket, sure, and Mayor Collins is weak-willed, but the rest of the council has backbones. And Ethan, where does he stand in the town's hierarchy?" Something knowing gleamed in Maggie's eyes. "Interested in our blacksmith, are you?" Lily felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Professionally speaking," she clarified, though not entirely honestly. "He seems to have the town's respect despite his differences." "Ethan keeps to himself mostly, but he's earned his place here," Maggie said. "Does honest work, fair prices, helps folks when they're in need without making a fuss about it. Not one for town politics usually, but this railroad business has stirred him up." She studied Lily thoughtfully. "You should attend the council meeting tonight. See Willow Creek's governing bodies in action before you decide anything." The suggestion was reasonable. Observing the town's leadership would give Lily insight into whether Willow Creek might truly offer the fresh start Ethan had dangled before her. "I will," she decided, "though I make no promises about putting myself forward as a candidate for the teaching position." Maggie smiled. "Fair enough. Now, how are your pie-making skills? I've got 6 apple pies to bake before closing, and these old hands could use some help." As Lily rolled out pie dough alongside Maggie, her mind continued to churn with possibilities. 3 days ago, her future had seemed clear. Marriage to Samuel Wright, a new life as a rancher's wife, security and purpose restored. Now, everything was uncertain again, but in a way that felt strangely liberating rather than frightening. For the first time since the fire that had scarred her, Lily found herself dreaming of possibilities rather than limitations. It was a fragile, tender feeling, hope uncurling, like the first green shoot after winter's long freeze. The Willow Creek Town Hall was a modest 2-story building of locally quarried stone that housed both government offices and the small jail. By 6:45, it was already filling with townspeople curious about the railway plans that had become the primary topic of conversation throughout Willow Creek. Lily slipped in quietly, choosing a seat near the back where she could observe. Without drawing attention, she had changed into her best dress, a dark green wool with minimal trim, and arranged her hair carefully, aware that first impressions would matter if she decided to present herself as a candidate for the teaching position. The council members filed in at precisely 7 o'clock, taking their places at a long table facing the gathered citizens. Mayor Collins, a thin man with nervous hands and thinning hair, sat center, flanked by Judge Parker and 3 other men Lily didn't recognize. To the left of the table sat Ethan at a smaller desk, papers neatly arranged before him, ready to record the proceedings. His eyes found Lily immediately, a flicker of approval crossing his face when he saw she had come. He gave a slight nod before turning his attention to Mayor Collins, who was calling the meeting to order. "Good evening, citizens of Willow Creek," the mayor began, his reedy voice carrying surprisingly well. "We have several matters to discuss tonight, but I know what's brought most of you here is the proposed railway extension. Judge Parker has kindly agreed to present the Northern Pacific's plans." The judge rose, an imposing figure with silver hair and the confident bearing of a man accustomed to authority. Using a large map that he unrolled across the council table, he outlined the proposed route, a spur line that would connect Willow Creek to the main east-west railway, bringing increased commerce, jobs, and progress to the previously isolated mountain town. The depot would be constructed here, he indicated, pointing to an area that Lily recognized as including Ethan's Forge and several other businesses along the main street. The railroad is prepared to offer fair compensation to affected property owners. What's fair mean exactly? Called a stout man with a shopkeeper's apron, Henderson of the Mercantile, Lily guessed. My family's run that store for 30 years. Can't just pick up and move without serious costs. Judge Parker's smile didn't reach his eyes. The railroad understands the inconvenience, Mr. Henderson. Compensation packages will reflect not just property values, but relocation costs. Samuel Wright has generously offered parcels of his land east of town at reduced rates for those needing to rebuild. A murmur ran through the crowd. Samuel himself sat in the front row, looking pleased at this public acknowledgement of his generosity. That's mighty kind, Henderson replied, skepticism evident in his tone. But that'd put us a good mile from the center of town. Customers won't make that trip for small purchases. The center of town will shift with the depot, Samuel said, turning to address the crowd directly, though he hadn't been invited to speak. That's the nature of progress, friends. We can fight it and be left behind, or embrace it and prosper. Mayor Collins nodded eagerly. Well said, Mr. Wright. Change brings opportunity. It also brings destruction, came a new voice. A middle-aged woman with steel-grey hair, pulled into a severe bun, stood up from her seat near the front. The proposed route cuts through Willow Creek's oldest neighborhood, including my boarding house and Mrs. Finley's bakery. Neither business can survive a move to the outskirts. Judge Parker's expression tightened. Mrs. Danvers, we understand. There will be temporary discomfort for some, but the overall economic benefit to Willow Creek will primarily flow to those who already have the most, Mrs. Danvers interrupted. Like certain council members with railroad investments. A tense silence fell over the room. Judge Parker's face darkened at the direct accusation of conflict of interest. But before he could respond, Mayor Collins intervened. That's quite enough. Mrs. Danvers, we'll have civil discourse or none at all. He shuffled papers nervously. Now, the council will review the full proposal and take a preliminary vote at next week's meeting. In the meantime, let's move to another business. For the next hour, the council addressed various town matters, repairs needed for the bridge over Willow Creek, funding for additional street lamps, and complaints about loose livestock. Lily listened attentively, noting the dynamics between council members and citizens. The mayor clearly deferred to Judge Parker on most matters, while the other council members seemed divided in their allegiances. Ethan maintained a neutral expression throughout, documenting the proceedings with methodical precision. Only once, when Samuel Wright made a dismissive comment about sentimental attachments to outdated structures, did Lily see his jaw tighten momentarily. Finally, Mayor Collins cleared his throat. One last item on the agenda. Mrs. Simmons has formally submitted her resignation as schoolteacher, effective December 15th. We need to begin the search for a replacement immediately. This was the moment. Lily felt her heart quicken as she considered whether to speak up. Fear coiled in her stomach, fear of rejection, of humiliation, of having to face Samuel Wright's smug satisfaction if the council dismissed her based on her appearance. But then she caught Ethan's eye. There was no pressure in his gaze, only quiet confidence, as if he already knew her worth regardless of what anyone else might decide. It steadied her. Lily rose from her seat, ignoring the curious glances that turned her way. Mayor Collins, if I may address the council. The mayor peered at her, clearly trying to place her. You're new to Willow Creek, aren't you, miss? Morgan, Lily Morgan, she supplied, moving forward to stand before the council table. I arrived yesterday from Philadelphia, where I taught at Briarwood Academy for young ladies for 12 years. I hold teaching credentials from Oberlin College and have letters of recommendation from the Academy's headmistress. A ripple of interest moved through the room. Samuel Wright's expression darkened as he realized what was happening. You're putting yourself forward as a candidate for the teaching position, Mayor Collins clarified, looking both surprised and intrigued. I am, Lily confirmed, drawing strength from the murmurs of interest around her. I specialize in literature, mathematics, and history, but am qualified to teach all primary and secondary subjects. Judge Parker leaned forward, eyes narrowing as they fixed on the scarred side of her face. Miss Morgan, teaching is a visible position in our community. Children can be sensitive to unusual appearances. The words were carefully chosen, but their meaning clear. Lily felt heat rise to her cheeks, but kept her voice steady. In my experience, Judge Parker, children respond to kindness and competence far more than to physical appearance. Any initial curiosity is quickly replaced by respect when they see that a teacher values their minds and treats them with dignity. Well said, came Mrs. Danvers' voice from the audience. My 3 grandchildren need proper schooling, not coddling from their prejudices. Mayor Collins glanced uncertainly at Judge Parker, then at Samuel Wright, whose thunderous expression spoke volumes. One of the other council members, a broad-shouldered man with a farmer's weathered complexion, spoke up. We should at least review Miss Morgan's credentials. Qualified teachers aren't exactly lining up at our door. I have them here, Lily said, producing a slim portfolio from her reticule, including letters attesting to my character and teaching abilities. The farmer, Councilman Davis, according to the nameplate before him, accepted the portfolio and began examining the documents, passing them to his colleagues. Even Judge Parker reluctantly reviewed them, his frown deepening as he read. These are certainly impressive qualifications, Mayor Collins admitted. Harvard-educated father, training at one of the country's finest women's colleges, years of experience with excellent reports. Samuel Wright rose abruptly. If I might speak, Mayor, while Miss Morgan's paper credentials appear sound, there are other considerations. She came to Willow Creek under unusual circumstances. A hush fell over the room as all eyes turned to Lily, then back to Samuel. The implied scandal hung in the air. Lily felt momentary panic. Would he publicly humiliate her by announcing she had come as his mail-order bride, only to be rejected? But Samuel was too calculating for such direct cruelty. Miss Morgan arrived as a prospective governess for my household, he said smoothly, the lie sliding easily from his lips. Unfortunately, I found her temperament unsuitable for the position, which is why she now seeks alternative employment. The fabrication stunned Lily. Why would Samuel lie, rather, than simply admit he had rejected her as a potential wife? Then understanding dawned. Admitting he had advertised for a mail-order bride would damage his standing among the more respectable town matrons, revealing his desperation and confirming rumors about why local women avoided his courtship. Before Lily could decide how to respond, Ethan's deep voice cut through the tension. That's not accurate, Mr. Wright. All eyes turned to the blacksmith, who had risen from his secretary's desk. Miss Morgan came to Willow Creek in response to your advertisement for a wife. You rejected her upon seeing her scars after exchanging letters for months. The blunt truth landed like a physical blow. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the town hall. Samuel's face flushed dark with rage and embarrassment. How dare you? He sputtered. This is a private matter and entirely irrelevant to Miss Morgan's suitability as a teacher. I agree it's irrelevant, Ethan replied calmly, which is why your attempt to discredit her with half-truths needed correction. Mayor Collins looked deeply uncomfortable. Perhaps we should discuss the teaching position in private session. No, Lily interrupted, surprising herself with her firmness. The circumstances of my arrival in Willow Creek have been brought into public discussion, so let me address them directly. She turned to face the gathered townspeople, heart pounding but voice steady. Yes, I came here to marry Mr. Wright after corresponding with him for nearly a year. He rejected me upon seeing the scars I received saving my niece from a house fire 5 years ago. That is the truth, plain and simple. She faced the council again. "But my personal disappointments have nothing to do with my qualifications as a teacher. Judge my abilities, my experience, my character, but judge them fairly on their merits alone." For a long moment, no one spoke. Lily could feel Samuel Wright's hatred burning into her back, but she kept her gaze fixed on the council members, refusing to be intimidated. Finally, Councilman Davis cleared his throat. "Miss Morgan's credentials are the strongest we've seen. I move to offer her the position provisionally, with a 3-month trial period beginning immediately to assist Mrs. Simmons until her confinement." "Second," said another councilman quickly. "Mayor." Collins looked trapped, glancing between Samuel Wright's thunderous face and Judge Parker's tight-lipped disapproval. "All in favor?" he finally asked. 3 hands raised, Councilman Davis and the 2 others, whose names Lily hadn't caught. Mayor Collins and Judge Parker kept their hands down. "Motion carries 3-2, the mayor said reluctantly. "Miss Morgan, the position pays $40 monthly, plus a $10 housing allowance. School hours are 8 to 3 Monday through Friday, with approximately 25 students ranging from 6 to 16 years of age." Relief and joy flooded through Lily. "Thank you, Councilman. I accept the position and will strive to merit your confidence." As the meeting adjourned, townspeople approached her, some curious, others openly welcoming. Mrs. Danvers insisted on introducing Lily to her grandchildren right away, while Henderson from the Mercantile offered credit at his store. "Until your first payday, teacher." Through it all, Lily was acutely aware of Ethan standing quietly nearby, organizing the council's papers with methodical precision while keeping a watchful eye on the proceedings. He had publicly defended her, risking Samuel Wright's considerable enmity to ensure the truth was known. Samuel himself had stormed out immediately after the vote, Judge Parker following close behind. Their displeasure was palpable, but in that moment it mattered less than the unexpected acceptance Lily found among Willow Creek's ordinary citizens. When the crowd finally thinned, Ethan approached, his expression unreadable in the lamplight. "Congratulations, teacher," he said, the title carrying none of the mockery Samuel might have infused it with. "Thank you for speaking up," Lily replied softly. "You didn't have to do that." "Truth matters," he said simply. Then, after a moment's hesitation, "Walk you back?" The night air held the crisp promise of frost by morning as they made their way down Willow Creek's main street. Neither spoke immediately, but the silence between them felt companionable rather than awkward. "Samuel Wright won't forgive this easily," Lily finally said, giving voice to the concern that tempered her elation. "He seems like a powerful enemy to make." "He is," Ethan agreed. "But he's not the only one with influence in Willow Creek." Lily glanced up at him, moonlight illuminating his scarred profile. "I know almost nothing about you," she realized aloud, "except that you're a blacksmith who serves as town secretary and defends strangers at personal cost." A corner of his mouth lifted. "Not much else worth knowing." "I disagree," Lily said quietly. "Your scars, are they why you understood what Samuel's rejection meant to me?" Ethan was silent for several paces. When he spoke, his voice was low, meant for her ears alone. "Fire takes more than skin, takes security, identity, makes strangers afraid, makes them look away. Or worse, stare while pretending not to." The simple truth of it resonated deep within. Lily. How many times had she endured exactly that? The sidelong glances, the 2 bright smiles that never quite met her eyes, the careful distance maintained by former friends and colleagues. "Yes," she whispered, "exactly that." They had reached Tom's livery stable. Light glowed from the windows of Lily's rented room above the workshop, promising warmth against the autumn chill. "What happened to your academy position wasn't about competence," Ethan said abruptly. "What happened with Wright wasn't about worth." "I know that," Lily replied, though the words sounded more confident than she sometimes felt. Intellectually, at least. Ethan nodded, understanding the distinction. Heart takes longer to convince than head. Does it ever fully believe? She asked, the question slipping out before she could recall it. Too personal, too vulnerable for such a new acquaintance, but Ethan didn't seem to find it presumptuous. He considered for a long moment, his grey eyes reflecting the stars overhead. Not yet, he finally answered with raw honesty. But some days come closer than others. Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition of shared wounds that went beyond physical scars, a possibility of mutual healing that neither was quite ready to name. I start teaching tomorrow? Lily asked, changing the subject to safer ground. Mrs. Simmons will expect you at the schoolhouse at 7:30, Ethan confirmed. Small white building behind the church. Can't miss it. I should prepare, Lily Sue said, though reluctant to end their conversation. Thank you again for everything, Ethan nodded, stepping back. Congratulations, teacher, he repeated, the title now carrying a warmth that made Lily smile despite her exhaustion. As he walked away toward his adjacent forge, Lily climbed the stairs to her room. Through the window she could see the scattered lights of Willow Creek spreading beneath the vast Colorado sky, and could make out the silhouette of mountains against the star-filled darkness. She had come to this place expecting to begin a life as Samuel Wright's wife. Instead, she would shape young minds, build a reputation based on her abilities rather than her appearance, and perhaps, just perhaps, find healing for wounds that went deeper than skin. 2 days in Willow Creek had already changed the course of her life. What might the coming months bring? The question filled her not with dread, but with a tentative anticipation she hadn't felt in years. The Willow Creek schoolhouse had once been a church, and it retained a certain austere dignity despite its peeling white paint and warped floorboards. Inside, rows of mismatched desks faced a small raised platform where the teacher's desk commanded a view of the entire room. A pot-bellied stove stood in the corner, currently cold, and a battered upright piano was pushed against the far wall. Martha Simmons greeted Lily with obvious relief, one hand resting on her swollen belly. Miss Morgan, thank heaven you're here. These children are running me ragged. As if on cue, a paper ball sailed across the room, prompting shrieks of laughter from a group of boys by the window. Mrs. Simmons sighed deeply, but Lily merely smiled, a sense of familiar purpose settling over her. "Boys," she called, her voice carrying the quiet authority developed over years of teaching, "please take your seats." To Mrs. Simmons' evident surprise, the children obeyed, though curious eyes fixed immediately on Lily's scarred face. She had expected this and met their gazes calmly, allowing them to look without shame or pretense. "I am Miss Morgan," she introduced herself, moving to stand before the teacher's desk. "I will be assisting Mrs. Simmons until Christmas and then continuing as your teacher thereafter. I look forward to learning all your names and discovering what you've been studying." A small girl in the front row raised her hand. "Miss Morgan, what happened to your face?" Mrs. Simmons gasped. "Abigail Henderson, that's terribly rude." "It's all right," Lily assured her, then addressed the child directly. "I was injured in a fire 5 years ago while rescuing my niece. The scars don't hurt anymore, but they are permanent." "Another." "And shut up. Were you scared?" "Were you scared?" Lily corrected gently. "Yes, very. But sometimes we find courage when we need it most." A boy of about 12 studied her skeptically. "Pa says you came to marry Mr. Wright, but he didn't want you because of your face." The bluntness of children could be breathtaking. Lily felt heat rise to her cheeks but kept her composure. "Your father is partially correct. Mr. Wright and I had corresponded, but upon meeting he decided we would not suit. Now I'm very fortunate to have the opportunity to teach all of you instead." Her direct honesty seemed to satisfy the children's curiosity. Mrs. Simmons looked relieved as the awkward moment passed. Now, Lily continued, I'd like each of you to tell me your name, age, and favorite subject. Then we'll review what you've been learning. By midday, Lily had a clear picture of the educational challenges facing Willow Creek's students. The older children had received inconsistent instruction from a rotating cast of temporary teachers, leaving significant gaps in their knowledge. The younger ones showed promise but needed structure and consistent expectations. During the lunch break, as the children ate in the schoolyard under Mrs. Simmons' watchful eye, Lily examined the meager supplies. A few tattered McGuffey readers, outdated arithmetic primers, a world map so old it still showed the Russian Empire, and a small collection of classic literature in varying states of disrepair. Making plans already? Came a deep voice from the doorway. Lily turned to find Ethan leaning against the doorframe, a wooden crate in his arms. He looked different in daylight, the scars on his face less dramatic, the lines around his eyes speaking of both hardship and humor. There's so much to do, she admitted. These children deserve better resources than this. Ethan nodded, setting down the crate on a nearby desk. Town council approved an emergency stipend for supplies when they hired you. Not much. $15, but it might help. That's very generous, Lily said, genuinely touched by this tangible vote of confidence. What's in the crate? Just some books I thought might be useful. Had them in my attic collecting dust. Curiously, Lily lifted the crate's lid to discover a treasure trove. Emerson's essays, Thoreau's Walden, several volumes of Shakespeare, Whitman's Leaves of Grass, and scientific texts covering basic chemistry and natural philosophy. Ethan, these are wonderful, she exclaimed, lifting a beautifully bound volume of Shelley's poetry. But surely you don't want to part with them permanently. He shrugged, though his eyes tracked the books with an affection that belied his casual tone. Books should be read, not hidden away. Consider it a long-term loan to the school. Lily traced the gilt lettering on the Shelley volume. You appreciate literature? It wasn't a question, but Ethan answered anyway. My mother was a teacher before... He gestured vaguely, leaving the sentence unfinished. She believed in the power of words to transport us beyond our circumstances. A wise woman, Lily said softly. These will make a tremendous difference to the older students especially. The sound of children's voices grew louder as they began returning from lunch. Ethan straightened, clearly uncomfortable with the prospect of an audience for their conversation. The Harvest Festival Saturday, he said abruptly, town tradition, might help you meet families, get settled. Are you asking me to attend with you? Lily clarified, heart quickening despite her attempt. At composure, Ethan's scarred face colored slightly. If you'd like, no obligation. The door burst open as the first wave of students tumbled in, stopping short at the sight of the massive blacksmith in their schoolroom. Whispers and giggles erupted immediately. I should go, Ethan said, stepping back. About Saturday, I'd be honored to attend with you, Lily replied, keeping her voice low enough that the children couldn't overhear. The transformation of Ethan's expression, from uncertainty to quiet pleasure, was something Lily knew she would remember long after he had nodded farewell and departed, leaving her to turn back to her new students with a warmth in her chest. That had nothing to do with the recently lit stove. The remainder of the week passed in a blur of activity. Each day, Lily rose early to prepare lessons, taught alongside Mrs. Simmons until 3 o'clock, then spent evenings developing a more structured curriculum and reviewing student work. The children's initial curiosity about her scars quickly gave way to engagement with her teaching methods, which combined rigorous expectations with genuine affection. By Friday afternoon, Lily had assessed each student's abilities, organized the classroom's meager resources into a more usable system, and begun forming relationships with the parents who came to collect their younger children after school. Most were cautiously welcoming, clearly reserving judgment until they could see results in their children's education. A few, like Mrs. Henderson from the Mercantile and Mrs. Danvers, were openly supportive, bringing small gifts of home-baked goods or offers of assistance with school events. Only one parent had been overtly hostile, a well-dressed woman named Cornelia Parker, whose pinched expression had soured further upon seeing Lily's scarred face. "My husband, Judge Parker, assured me the council would find someone more suitable," she had commented loudly while collecting her 9-year-old daughter. "Someone who wouldn't frighten impressionable children." "I find children are remarkably adaptable, Mrs. Parker," Lily had replied evenly. "Emma has shown excellent progress in arithmetic this week." The judge's wife had sniffed disapprovingly before departing, but Emma had flashed Lily a secret smile, slipping a wildflower onto her desk when her mother wasn't looking. Now, as Lily locked the schoolhouse on Friday afternoon, she felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with proving Mrs. Parker wrong and everything to do with the genuine progress her students were already showing. For the first time in 5 years, she felt fully in her element again, valued for her mind and skills, rather than judged for her appearance. "Miss Morgan!" Lily turned to see Maggie hurrying toward her, face flushed with exertion. "There you are! I've been looking everywhere. Is something wrong?" "Not wrong exactly," Maggie replied, catching her breath, "but you need to come with me right away. Mrs. Henderson has a proposition for you that can't wait." Curious and slightly concerned, Lily followed Maggie down the main street to Henderson's Mercantile. The store was unusually busy, filled with townspeople preparing for tomorrow's harvest festival. Mr. Henderson himself stood behind the counter, helping a customer select tobacco, while his wife directed a young clerk in arranging a display of preserved fruits. "There she is," Mrs. Henderson exclaimed upon seeing Lily. "Come, come, we have much to discuss." She led Lily and Maggie to a small office behind the store, where patterns of fabric were spread across a desk, alongside sketches of what appeared to be dresses. "The Harvest Festival dance is tomorrow night," Mrs. Henderson began without preamble. "And you can't possibly attend in a travel dress. Not for your first public appearance as our new teacher, and especially not when escorted by Ethan Blackwood." Lily blinked, startled by this unexpected concern. "I brought my best dress from Philadelphia," Mrs. Henderson interrupted dismissively. "Eastern styles are all well and good, but for a Colorado Harvest Festival, you need something more suitable. Besides," she added, her expression softening, "every new beginning deserves a new dress." Maggie nodded enthusiastically. "Clara Henderson was the finest seamstress in Denver before she married Henry. She's made my festival dresses for 6 years running." Lily was touched by the gesture, but hesitant. "That's incredibly kind, but I couldn't possibly impose." "Nonsense." Mrs. Henderson cut in briskly. "It's purely selfish on my part. As our teacher, you represent Willow Creek. I won't have Samuel Wright or that insufferable Cornelia Parker thinking we don't properly value education just because you're wearing an Eastern Day dress to a harvest dance." There was more behind the offer than professional pride, Lily suspected. This was Mrs. Henderson's way of showing support, of publicly aligning herself with the new teacher, despite Samuel Wright's obvious disapproval. "I'm honored," Lily said, sincerely. "But the festival is tomorrow. Surely there isn't time." Mrs. Henderson's smile turned triumphant. "I started cutting the pattern the moment the council hired you. Just need to do the final fitting." She held up a length of deep copper, fabric that caught the light like autumn leaves. "This color will complement your complexion beautifully." Before Lily could protest further, she found herself standing on a low stool, being measured and pinned as Mrs. Henderson worked with the swift efficiency of an artist confident in her medium. "Clara's dresses are legendary," Maggie confided, from her perch on a nearby chair. "Half the single men attend the harvest dance, just hoping to see what she's created for the unmarried ladies each year." Mrs. Henderson chuckled. "Which makes it all the more delicious that you'll be arriving with Ethan Blackwood. The man hasn't attended a social function in the 5 years I've known him." "We're merely friends," Lily protested, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. "He's been kind to a newcomer, nothing more." The two women exchanged knowing glances that made Lily's blush deepen. "Ethan Blackwood defended you publicly against Samuel Wright," Maggie pointed out. "That's not nothing in a small town where Wright holds so many purse strings, and he's been seen at the schoolhouse 3 times this week," Mrs. Henderson added, mouth full of pins. "My Henry says Blackwood appears to be delivering books, but I've never known a man to need quite so many trips for a single crate of literature." This was true, Lily had to admit. Ethan had indeed found various excuses to visit the schoolhouse, delivering books, fixing a loose window sash, reinforcing a wobbly desk. Each time he had stayed only briefly, speaking little but observing her, teaching with an intensity that might have been unsettling from anyone else. "He's simply being neighborly," Lily insisted, though even to her own ears the protest sounded hollow. Mrs. Henderson stood back to assess her work. "Neighborly," she repeated skeptically. "Is that what they call courtship in Philadelphia these your days?" "Clara," Maggie scolded. Through her eyes danced with amusement. "Don't embarrass our teacher." Mrs. Henderson removed the pins from her mouth with a theatrical sigh. "You're right, of course. Forgive me, Miss Morgan. Small towns breed terrible habits of familiarity." She paused, then added more seriously, "But we also protect our own. You should know that not everyone shares Samuel Wright's prejudices or Cornelia Parker's snobbery." The sincerity in her voice touched Lily deeply. "Thank you," she said simply, "for the dress and for the welcome." "Speaking of welcome," Maggie interjected, "have you found more permanent lodgings yet? Tom's rooms are comfortable enough, but you'll want your own place once you're properly settled." It was a concern Lily had pushed aside during the busy first week of teaching, but one that needed addressing. "I've been so focused on the school, I haven't had time to inquire about housing options." Mrs. Henderson brightened. "As it happens, I might have a solution. My sister-in-law owns a small cottage at the edge of town, just 2 rooms and a kitchen, but snug and private. She's been renting it to seasonal mine workers, but they've moved on for the winter. With some cleaning and feminine touches, it could be quite suitable for a teacher's residence." "That sounds perfect," Lily said, relieved at the prospect of a place truly her own. "What would the rent be?" $8 monthly, including firewood from our timber stand." Mrs. Henderson stepped back, assessing the half-pinned dress with a critical eye. "You could move in next week if it suits you." The pieces of Lily's new life were falling into place with surprising speed. Teaching position, housing, even the beginnings of a social circle. 1 week ago, she had stepped off the train to face Samuel Wright's rejection. Certain her future had collapsed. Now she stood on the threshold of possibilities she could never have imagined in Philadelphia. "I'll take it," she decided, "and thank you, truly, for everything." By dusk, Lily had returned to her room above the workshop with the promise that her festival dress would be ready by tomorrow afternoon. As she climbed the outer stairs, she noticed light spilling from Ethan's forge despite the late hour. Curiosity drew her to the open doorway. Inside, Ethan stood at his anvil, stripped to his waist in the forge's heat, hammering a glowing piece of metal with methodical precision. The scars she had glimpsed on his neck extended across his right shoulder and down his arm, the skin puckered and discolored by old burns. Yet there was nothing diminished about him. His movements held a fluid strength, muscles shifting beneath skin as he worked the metal with an artist's concentration. Sweat gleamed on his brow, catching the firelight, like the sparks that scattered with each strike of his hammer. Lily must have made some sound, for Ethan suddenly looked up, his expression shifting from surprise to self-consciousness as he registered her presence. He reached for his shirt, which hung from a nearby hook. "Don't," Lily said, the word escaping, before she could consider its propriety. "Please, I didn't mean to interrupt your work." Ethan hesitated, caught between ingrained modesty and the practical reality that his forge was too hot for unnecessary clothing. After a moment, he turned back to the anvil, though tension remained in the set of his shoulders. "What are you making?" Lily asked, stepping just inside the doorway, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "Hair comb," he replied, holding up the glowing metal to inspect its curve. "Festival gift for Mrs. Simmons. Small thanks for teaching our children these years." The thoughtfulness of the gesture didn't surprise Lily, but his craftsmanship did. What had appeared to be simple metalwork was revealing itself as delicate artistry, the emerging comb featuring intricate leaf patterns along its spine. "It's beautiful," she said sincerely. "I had no idea blacksmithing included such fine work." A ghost of a smile touched Ethan's lips. "Most don't notice beyond horseshoes and hinges." He dipped the glowing metal into a water bucket, sending up a cloud of steam before returning it to the fire to heat again. The movement highlighted the muscled contours of his back, the contrast between smooth skin and scarred tissue. "Your burns," Lily ventured carefully. "They extend further than your face." Ethan nodded without looking up from his work. "Right side mostly, shoulder to hip." "Tennessee?" she asked, remembering his brief mention of his origins. His hands stilled momentarily, then resumed their precise movements. "Foundry accident. 8 years ago." The brevity spoke volumes. Whatever had happened in Tennessee had driven him west, seeking a new beginning just as she now was. Lily understood the desire to leave painful memories behind, too well to press for details he wasn't ready to share. Instead, she changed the subject. "Mrs. Henderson is making me a dress for tomorrow's festival. Apparently, my Philadelphia attire is unsuitable for a Colorado harvest dance." This drew a genuine chuckle from Ethan. "Clara Henderson would dress the entire town if permitted. Take pride in it." "She mentioned you don't usually attend social functions," Lily said, watching his reaction carefully. Ethan's hammer paused mid-stroke. "Don't dance much these days." The implication hung between them that once, before the fire, he had. Just as Lily had once attended Philadelphia's literary society gatherings without self-consciousness, had once worn fashionable dresses without calculating how well they disguised. "Her scars, neither do I," she admitted softly, "but perhaps we could not dance together?" Ethan looked up then, his grey eyes reflecting the forge's flames. "I'd like that," he said simply. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken understanding. Then Ethan cleared his throat, returning to his work with renewed focus. Should finish this, early start tomorrow, with festival preparations. "Of course," Lily said, recognizing the dismissal for what it was, not rejection, but a man accustomed to solitude needing space to process this shifting connection between them. "Good night, Ethan." As she turned to go, his voice followed her, low but clear above the forge's crackle. "Looking forward to tomorrow, Lily." The use of her first name, unprecedented until now, sent a warm current through her veins that had nothing to do with the forge's heat. "As am I," she replied, not turning back lest he see the effect those simple words had on her. In her room, Lily lit the oil lamp and moved to the small mirror above the wash basin. For the first time in 5 years, she studied her reflection without flinching, the smooth skin of her left cheek contrasting with the ridged scars that traced across the right side of her face from temple to jaw. She had spent so long seeing only the damage, focusing on what had been lost. Tonight, illuminated by lamplight and something new kindling in her heart, she saw more. The clear hazel eyes that had captivated her students, the determined set of her mouth that had stood up to Samuel Wright and Cornelia Parker, the strength that had carried her through fire and rejection to this unexpected place of new beginnings. Not beautiful, she acknowledged to her reflection, but perhaps enough. Willow Creek's Harvest Festival transformed the modest mountain town into a riot of color and activity. The main street had been decorated with garlands of autumn leaves and paper lanterns, while stalls selling everything from apple cider to handcrafted toys lined the central square. Farmers displayed their finest produce for judging. Children ran laughing between exhibits, and the tantalizing aroma of roasting meats and baked goods filled the crisp October air. Lily stood in Mrs. Henderson's parlor, scarcely recognizing her own reflection in the full-length mirror. The copper-colored dress fit perfectly, its sweeping skirt and fitted bodice creating an elegance she hadn't experienced since before the fire. Rather than designing a high neckline to hide her scars, Mrs. Henderson had created an asymmetrical collar that drew the eye to Lily's graceful neck and shoulders, somehow making the scars seem a deliberate part of the design rather than a flaw to be hidden. "You look magnificent," Mrs. Henderson declared, adjusting a final fold. "Every inch a lady of distinction." "It's the most beautiful dress I've ever worn," Lily said sincerely. "I couldn't have imagined anything so perfect." Mrs. Henderson beamed with professional pride. "The fabric complements your coloring beautifully. And your hair—" Lily had arranged her brown locks in a simple but elegant style, with copper ribbons woven through the braided crown. The effect was striking without being ostentatious, appropriate for a teacher yet festive enough for the celebration. A knock at the front door sent Mrs. Henderson hurrying to answer, returning moments later with barely contained excitement. "Your escort has arrived," she announced, eyes twinkling. "And may I say, Ethan Blackwood cleans up remarkably well." Heart suddenly racing, Lily smoothed her skirts and took a steadying breath before following Mrs. Henderson to the parlor. Ethan stood awkwardly by the fireplace, shifting under Mr. Henderson's genial questioning about railroad developments. He wore a crisp white shirt, dark waistcoat, and formal trousers that had clearly been carefully pressed for the occasion. His usually untamed hair had been neatly combed, though a rebellious lock still fell across his forehead. Most striking was his clean-shaven jaw, which accentuated the strong lines of his face while highlighting rather than hiding the scars on the right side. He looked up as Lily entered, his grey eyes widening as they took in her transformed appearance. For a moment he seemed unable to speak, an uncharacteristic flush rising to his face. "Miss Morgan," he finally managed, his deep voice slightly hoarse. "You look remarkable." The simple sincerity of the compliment warmed Lily far more than any flowery flattery might have. "As do you, Mr. Blackwood," she replied, noting with pleasure how the waistcoat emphasized his powerful shoulders. Quite the change from the forge. A hint of a smile tugged at his mouth. Special occasion. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat theatrically. "You two had best be on your way. First dance starts at 7 sharp. And Clara has ensured our new teacher will be the belle of the ball." "Henry," his wife scolded, though she looked delighted at her husband's teasing. Ethan offered Lily his arm, his right arm, she noted, the one bearing scars that matched her own. The subtle gesture of solidarity was not lost on her as she placed her hand in the crook of his elbow. "Shall we?" he asked, and at her nod, guided her toward the door. Outside, lanterns had been lit all along the street, casting a golden glow over the festivities. Townspeople nodded greetings as they passed, some casting curious glances at the unexpected pair. The scarred blacksmith and the new teacher, both dressed in their finest, moving together through the gathering dusk. The town hall had been transformed for the harvest dance, its austere interior now festooned with autumn decorations. Trestle tables laden with food and drink lined one wall, while a small ensemble of local musicians tuned their instruments on a makeshift stage. Couples and families were already arriving, the room humming with conversation and laughter. Lily felt a momentary trepidation as they entered. In Philadelphia, she had gradually withdrawn from such social gatherings after the fire, tired of the poorly disguised discomfort of former friends and the painful awareness of being an object of pity. But this was different. This was Willow Creek, where she was building a new identity not defined by tragedy. Maggie spotted them immediately, hurrying over with 2 cups of cider. "Finally! I was beginning to think you'd changed your mind." "Wouldn't dare," Ethan replied with surprising dry humor. "Town would never forgive me for depriving them of the chance to meet our new teacher properly." "And admire Clara Henderson's latest masterpiece," Maggie added, nodding appreciatively at Lily's dress. "You look lovely, dear. Doesn't she, Ethan?" The blacksmith's usual stoicism softened as he glanced at Lily. "Beyond words," he agreed quietly. The simple statement, spoken for her alone despite Maggie's presence, touched Lily deeply. Unlike Samuel, Wright, who had seen only her scars, Ethan saw her completely, honestly, without pretense or pity. Mayor Collins took the stage, raising his hands for quiet. "Friends and neighbors, welcome to Willow Creek's 37th Annual Harvest Festival." Cheers and applause greeted his announcement. "Before the dancing begins, please join me in recognizing this year's Harvest Champions." A series of awards followed: largest pumpkin, finest corn crop, best preserves, most beautiful quilt. Each winner received enthusiastic applause, the simple recognition clearly valued by the hard-working community. "And finally," the mayor concluded, "I'd like to introduce our newest resident, Miss Lily Morgan, who has graciously agreed to take over teaching duties from Mrs. Simmons." He gestured toward Lily. "Miss Morgan brings impressive credentials from Philadelphia, and we're fortunate to have her join our community." All eyes turned to Lily, who felt heat rise to her cheeks at the sudden attention, but there was no rejection in these gazes, no poorly disguised revulsion, only curiosity and welcome. "Thank you, Mayor Collins," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the hall. "I'm honored to be entrusted with your children's education and grateful for the warm welcome Willow Creek has extended to me." Her words were met with approving nods and scattered applause. Even those who had initially seemed skeptical, like Councilman Parker, appeared to be reserving judgment rather than opposing her outright. Only Samuel Wright, standing near the refreshment table with Judge Parker, maintained a stony expression of disapproval. Their wives, Cornelia Parker and a thin, elegantly dressed woman Lily hadn't met, whispered behind gloved hands while casting sidelong glances in her direction. Ethan noticed the exchange, his posture stiffening slightly. "Ignore them," he murmured. "Their opinion matters less than they believe." The musicians struck up a lively tune, and couples began moving to the center of the room for the first dance. Lily felt Ethan tense beside her, his earlier confidence wavering. "We could step outside," he offered, clearly anticipating her discomfort with being on display. "Get some air." But Lily had spent 5 years retreating from life, hiding her scars and herself from public view. Tonight, wearing Mrs. Henderson's beautiful creation and standing beside a man who saw beyond physical imperfection, she found herself unwilling to shrink away. "Actually," she said, summoning courage she hadn't known she possessed, "I believe you promised me a dance." Surprise flickered across Ethan's face, followed by something like admiration. "Been a while," he warned. "Might step on your toes." "I'll risk it," Lily replied with a smile. Tentatively, he led her to the edge of the dance floor. His hand was warm and solid against her waist, his other gently clasping hers as they began to move with the music. His initial stiffness gradually melted away as they found a rhythm together, turning among the other couples with unexpected grace. "You dance well for a man who claims to be out of practice," Lily observed as he guided her through a turn. A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Like riding a horse. Body remembers. They moved together as if they'd danced 100 times before, their steps falling into natural harmony. Lily was acutely aware of his hand at her waist, the subtle scent of soap and leather that clung to him despite his formal attire, the way his grey eyes never left her face as they circled the floor. "People are staring," she murmured, noting the curious glances from surrounding dancers. "Not at your scars," Ethan replied simply. "At your beauty." The words, spoken with such matter-of-fact certainty, caught Lily by surprise. Since the fire, no one had called her beautiful, not honestly, not without the shadow of pity or the false brightness of attempted comfort. "I'm not," she began, but Ethan shook his head, cutting off her protest. "Beauty isn't just unmarked skin," he said, his voice low and intent. "It's courage, kindness, strength that fire couldn't burn away." The music swelled around them, but Lily barely heard it, transfixed by the raw honesty in Ethan's gaze. In that moment she saw herself through his eyes, not as damaged goods or an object of pity, but as a woman of substance, scars and all. "Thank you," she whispered, unable to articulate the depth of what his words meant to her. Ethan nodded once, understanding in his eyes as he guided her through the final measures of the dance. As the music ended, they remained still for a moment, reluctant to break the connection that had formed between them. A slow clapping intruded on their private moment. Samuel Wright stood at the edge of the dance floor, his handsome face twisted in a mockery of appreciation. "How touching," he drawled, loud enough for nearby dancers to hear. The scarred blacksmith and the disfigured teacher, quite the matched set. Lily felt Ethan tense beside her, a muscle working in his jaw as he controlled his anger. Before either could respond, Clara Henderson stepped forward, her normally cheerful face hardened with disapproval. "Samuel Wright, you forget yourself," she said coldly. "This is a community celebration, not an opportunity for your particular brand of cruelty." Several townspeople murmured agreement, moving to stand near Lily and Ethan in silent support. Samuel's eyes narrowed at this unexpected resistance. "I merely observe what others are too polite to mention," he retorted. "Our new teacher came to Willow Creek under false pretenses, hiding her condition. Now she parades at our festival, making a spectacle. The only spectacle here is yours, Wright." The voice belonged to Councilman Davis, who had joined the growing circle around them. "Miss Morgan has conducted herself with nothing but dignity since arriving. More than can be said for you." Samuel's face darkened with anger, but Judge Parker placed a restraining hand on his arm. "Perhaps we should step outside," the judge suggested quietly, casting an uneasy glance at the hostile faces surrounding them. "An excellent suggestion," Mayor Collins agreed, hurrying over to diffuse the tension. "Mr. Wright, Judge Parker, I believe the committee is waiting to discuss the railroad proposal." As the men reluctantly withdrew, muttering among themselves, Lily found herself surrounded by supportive townspeople. Mrs. Danvers patted her hand reassuringly, while Maggie shot daggers with her eyes at Samuel's retreating back. "Don't let him spoil your evening, dear," Mrs. Henderson advised. "His sort can't bear to see others happy when they're so miserable themselves." "I'm fine," Lily assured them, though her voice trembled slightly. Truly. Throughout the exchange, Ethan had remained silent, a solid presence at her side. Now, as the crowd dispersed and the musicians began another tune, he leaned down to speak quietly in her ear. "Want to leave?" The concern in his voice touched her, but Lily found herself unwilling to retreat. "No," she decided, "I won't give him the satisfaction." Approval flickered in Ethan's eyes. Another dance, then. They remained at the festival for 2 more hours, dancing several times, accepting congratulations on Lily's teaching appointment, and sampling Mrs. Jenkins's famous apple pie. Throughout the evening, Samuel Wright and his allies kept their distance. though Lily occasionally felt their disapproving glares from across the room. By the time Ethan escorted her back to her room above the livery stable, the moon had risen, high above Willow Creek, painting the town in silver light. They walked in comfortable silence, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "Thank you for a lovely evening," Lily said as they reached the bottom of the stairs. Despite Mr. Wright's best efforts to ruin it, Ethan's expression darkened at the mention of Samuel. "Man's playing a dangerous game. Railroad business has him believing he's untouchable. Will the council approve the proposed route?" Lily asked, remembering that it would displace Ethan's forge along with other businesses. "Votes next week." He shrugged his powerful shoulders. "Outcomes uncertain. Parker and Collins support it. Davis and Thornton oppose. Henderson's the swing vote." "And if it passes, what will you do?" Ethan was silent for a long moment, his scarred face thoughtful in the moonlight. "Rebuild, I suppose. Found my place here. Won't give that up easily." The simple statement contained volumes about belonging, about perseverance, about creating a home where one was valued despite visible differences. It resonated deeply with Lily's own emerging feelings about Willow Creek. "I understand," she said softly. "I've only been here a week, yet somehow—" "Feels right," Ethan finished for her. "Like you found something you didn't know you were looking for." "Yes, exactly." Lily studied his face, marveling at how this man, who spoke so little, could articulate her feelings so precisely. "Ethan, may I ask you something personal?" He nodded, expression open, despite the wariness that flickered in his eyes. "The fire that scarred you, was that why you left Tennessee?" Pain shadowed his face, but he didn't withdraw as she had half expected. "Partially," he admitted. "Foundry accident. Molten metal spilled. 3 men died. I lived, but—" He gestured to his scarred side. "I'm so sorry," Lily said quietly. "Afterward, everything changed. People looked at me differently. Some with pity, some with revulsion, even family." His voice held old hurt, long contained but never fully healed. "Couldn't stay. Needed somewhere new. Somewhere I could be judged by what I could do, not what I looked like." "And you found that here," Lily said, understanding completely. Ethan nodded. "Mostly. Town needed a blacksmith. Didn't care about my scars as long as I could shoe a horse and fix a wagon. Took time to truly belong, but eventually they saw beyond the surface," Lily finished, "to the man beneath." "As they'll see you," Ethan said with unexpected gentleness, already beginning to. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken understanding. Without conscious thought, Lily reached up to touch the scarred side of his face, her fingers tracing the ridged tissue with gentle acceptance. Ethan went very still under her touch, his grey eyes dark with emotion in the moonlight. Slowly, giving her every chance to withdraw, he raised his hand to mirror her gesture, calloused fingers brushing the scars on her cheek with a reverence that brought tears to her eyes. "Beautiful," he murmured, the word carrying the weight of absolute conviction. Lily trembled, not from fear or shame, but from the profound acceptance in his touch. For the first time since the fire, she didn't feel the need to turn her scarred side away or hide behind carefully arranged hair. With Ethan, she could simply be, fully seen, fully accepted. The sound of laughter from late festival-goers broke the spell. Ethan reluctantly lowered his hand, though his eyes remained fixed on hers. "Should let you rest," he said, voice roughened with emotion. "School tomorrow." "It's Saturday," Lily reminded him with a small smile, the corner of his mouth lifted. "So it is." Despite the acknowledgement, neither moved to prolong the evening. Whatever was growing between them felt too precious, too fragile for haste. They had both been burned by life, left with visible reminders of their suffering. Trust and intimacy would come in their own time, not to be rushed. Good night, Ethan, Lily said softly. Thank you for the dance, and for defending me against Samuel. Town defended you, he corrected. I just stood by your side. Which meant everything, she assured him. As she climbed the stairs to her room, Lily felt lighter than she had in years, as if some burden she'd carried since the fire had begun to lift from her shoulders. Philadelphia, with its painful memories and social strictures, seemed a world away. Here in Willow Creek, against all expectations, she was finding not just a place to work, but perhaps a place to truly live again. 3 months later, snow blanketed Willow Creek in pristine white, transforming the mountain town into a scene from a Christmas card. Frost patterns decorated windows, smoke curled from chimneys, and children's laughter rang out as they sledded down the gentle slope behind the church. Inside the schoolhouse, a fire crackled merrily in the wood stove as Lily arranged evergreen boughs along the windows for the Christmas pageant. The classroom had changed dramatically since her arrival, walls now adorned with student artwork and maps, bookshelves filled with volumes donated by townspeople or purchased with the modest school budget, desks arranged in orderly rows rather than haphazard clusters. The students had changed too. In 3 months of consistent instruction, they had progressed remarkably in their studies. Even little Emma Parker, initially withdrawn under her mother's disapproving influence, had blossomed into an eager student with a particular talent for mathematics. The railroad vote had ended in stalemate, with Councilman Henderson surprising everyone by proposing an alternative route that would spare the existing businesses while still bringing the desired connection to Denver. The compromise was still being negotiated, but for now, Ethan's forge and the other threatened establishments remained secure. Lily's own position had solidified as parents observed their children's progress and enthusiasm. The provisional period of her appointment had ended with unanimous council approval for her permanent employment, even Judge Parker voting in her favor after Emma's glowing reports about her teacher's methods. Samuel Wright remained a thorn in her side, speaking against her at every opportunity, but his influence had waned as the town embraced its new teacher. His final attempt to undermine her, spreading rumors that she and Ethan were engaged in improper relations, had backfired spectacularly when Mrs. Danvers led a delegation of respectable matrons to publicly vouch for Lily's character. A knock at the schoolhouse door interrupted her decorating. Lily opened it to find Ethan standing on the threshold, snow dusting his broad shoulders and dark hair. "Brought this," he said, holding up a small wooden chest. "For the pageant." Lily welcomed him inside, closing the door against the winter chill. "The props chest! It's perfect, Ethan. The children will be thrilled." He set it down carefully, then reached into his coat pocket. "Also this." He handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with string. Opening it, Lily gasped at the exquisite silver brooch shaped like an open book, tiny words engraved across its pages. "Knowledge is light," she read aloud, tracing the delicate lettering. "Ethan, did you make this?" He nodded, a rare, full smile, transforming his scarred face. "Christmas gift, too impatient to wait for the actual day." "It's beautiful," Lily said, deeply touched by the personal nature of the gift. "I'll treasure it always." Their relationship had developed slowly over the past months. Shared meals, walks through town, quiet evenings reading by the fire in her small cottage. The physical attraction between them remained powerful, but it was the deeper connection of kindred spirits that had grown into something precious to them both. Ethan took the brooch gently from her hands, pinning it to the collar of her dress with careful movements. His fingers lingered there, warm against the hollow of her throat. "There's something else," he said, an uncharacteristic nervousness in his voice. "Question I've been meaning to ask?" Lily's heart quickened as she met his grey eyes, now dark with Emotion. Yes, cottage next to mine is for sale. Smith family's moving to Denver. He paused, gathering his courage. Thought we might purchase it together, as husband and wife. The proposal, delivered in Ethan's typical straightforward manner, nonetheless took Lily's breath away. Not because it was unexpected. Their growing feelings had been clear to everyone, in Willow Creek for months, but because of the perfect rightness of it. "Are you asking me to marry you, Ethan Blackwood?" she clarified, joy bubbling up inside her. He nodded, a vulnerability in his expression that few ever saw. Not offering wealth or perfection, just honest love and partnership, a life built together. Tears filled Lily's eyes, not from sadness but from overwhelming happiness. When she had boarded that train to Colorado, heartbroken and desperate after losing her teaching position, she could never have imagined finding not just professional fulfillment, but deep, abiding love. "Yes," she said simply, reaching up to touch the scarred side of his face. "With all my heart, yes." The kiss they shared sealed more than a promise of marriage. It was an affirmation that true beauty lay not in unblemished surfaces, but in souls tempered by adversity, in hearts brave enough to risk love despite past wounds, in the courage to begin anew when life's fires had left their marks. In finding each other, two people once defined by their scars had discovered something profound, that in the right eyes their supposed flaws were simply part of the map that had led them home. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.